Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to plunge into some really fascinating topics, give you that shortcut to being, well, truly well-informed. Today, we're looking at financial strategies, the kind the wealthy apparently use that often seem pretty counterintuitive to the rest of us. We're going to uncover some surprising things about IRS tax forms.
Yeah, our deep dive is leaning heavily on material from Rick the Wealth Coach, and we're really zeroing in on this key difference between, the standard IRS Form 1040 we all know and the much less common but potentially very powerful Form 1041. So our mission today is to unpack how wealthy individuals reportedly use this Form 1041, and not just for the usual estate and trust stuff, but actually to reclaim significant funds, get major tax benefits. It's like revealing a financial strategy that's probably way outside the normal advice you hear. Okay, so let's kick off with something that might make you rethink a few things. Most of us know Form 1040, right? Millions file it. But what if that form, the one we all use, is actually kind of handcuffing your financial potential? Okay, let's unpack this.
It's really interesting how the source material frames this. Rick, the wealth coach, draws this incredibly sharp line between these two forms and, the whole thinking behind them. So Form 1040, like you said, that's for individuals. It's all set up for deductions, maybe some small credits, Schedule A, Schedule C, if you have a business, earned income credit, that kind of thing, and the money you get back. It's usually just a percentage of what you spend. But the crucial part, according to this source, is that it positions you, the individual, as a debtor. You're tied directly to your Social Security number.
A debtor. Okay, that's a specific way to put it.
Exactly. Now flip that. Form 1041 U.S. income tax return for estates and trusts. This isn't filed by you personally, but by a fiduciary. It reports what the trust or estate is doing, not your personal income. And this difference is, well, it's huge because it positions the entity, the trust or the estate, as a creditor.
A creditor.
Oh, right. And being a creditor gives you legal standing. The ability, in some scenarios described, to reclaim potentially 100% of money that's been deposited in bank accounts, often using specific forms like the 1099-A or 1099 OID. And it goes beyond just the money recovery, apparently. It offers privacy, serious asset protection, helps avoid probate court. It's all geared toward building generational wealth.
Wow. So it's not just semantics, debtor versus creditor. It sounds like it unlocks a completely different set of possibilities.
It's framed as a fundamental mindset shift. The 1040 filer might be thinking about the next year's refund, short-term stuff. But the 1041 filer, based on this material, is thinking long-term, legacy, posterity, managing wealth across generations.
That really does change the perspective, doesn't it, on how wealth isn't just, managed day to day, but how it's built up differently than the usual advice suggests. It makes you wonder, though, if this is so different, why don't more people know about it? Which leads right into the big question. How on earth is it possible to reclaim 100% of money deposited? Maybe even more. What's the mechanism behind that? It sounds, well, almost unbelievable. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, to get how this reclamation could even work, you have to sort of understand a key concept about our financial system. It's often called modern money mechanics. This isn't some fringe theory. It's basically the Federal Reserve's own explanation of how money gets created in our fractional reserve banking system.
Right, fractional reserve. I've heard the term.
Yeah. So think about it like this. You deposit, say, $100 in the bank. They don't just, put it in a little box with your name on it.
No, of course not.
Right. They use that $100 as a base to create way more money. They lend out maybe $900 or even more based on your initial deposit. They create new money through loans and investments. That's the fractional reserve part. They only had to keep a small fraction of your deposit on hand. And actually, get this, in 2020, the reserve requirements for many types of accounts dropped to 0%.
Zero. Wow. So they can lend out even more.
Potentially, yes. It allows for much greater credit expansion. So the big implication here is that your deposit, it's actually an asset for the bank. It has a market value they can monetize way beyond the face value you deposited. The bank makes significant profit from your money.
Okay, I think I follow that part. Banks use our money to make money.
Exactly. Now, here's where the 1041 strategy, as described, comes in. If you're just filing a 1040 as an individual, you're generally seen as a debtor. You don't really have the legal footing to go after that extra value the bank generated, but a trust or estate filing a 1041, that positions the trust as a creditor. And under U.S. law, a creditor has the right to, call in a liability, to make a claim. The 1041 filing becomes the paperwork, the mechanism within the tax system that documents this creditor status and makes the claim.
So the form itself is like the legal tool to assert that creditor right.
That seems to be the core idea presented. The source gives a pretty striking example. A client put $96,000 into a trust bank account. 13 months later, using this process, they reportedly got back over $1 million, $1,042,546, plus another $76,800 or so in interest.
Wait, from a $96,000 deposit? That's
Yeah.
more than 10 times back.
Yeah, achieved by reporting those funds through a 1041, using a specific trust structure. So the real insight isn't just the tax form, it's reframing your deposit. It's not passive cash, it's an active asset that potentially can be reclaimed. That's the game changer described here.
That example really puts it into perspective. From just a deposit to, well, potentially a huge return. Okay, but to really understand the nuts and bolts, can you break down those specific forms you mentioned, the 1099-A and 1099 OID? How do they actually make this happen? Sounds like they're the real keys here.
Right, let's look at how these forms are reportedly used in this specific strategy. It's a bit different from their typical use. First, Form 1099-A. The title is Acquisition or Abandonment of Secured Property. Usually you see this with foreclosures, repossessions. But in this strategy, the trust, acting as the creditor, essentially uses it to claim acquisition of the value the bank generated using the trust's deposited funds. Think of that generated value as the property the trust is claiming back.
So the property isn't physical, it's the leveraged value.
Exactly. It's a claim of right to that value created by the bank. The form would show, the date the claim is made, the fair market value, which could be that leveraged amount, and it apparently indicates the bank is liable for repayment.
Okay, that's the 1099-A. What about the 1099 OID?
So 1099 OID is original issue discount. Typically, this is for interest from bonds bought for less than their face value. In this strategy, though, the deposit itself is treated almost like a bond or some instrument issued by the trust to the bank. The OID then represents the earnings or the interest the bank generated by using the trust's money. It's like claiming the profit portion.
Ah, so one form claims the leveraged principal value, the other claims the earnings or interest on it.
That's the concept. And then both of these, the 1099-A showing the big asset value and the 1099 OID showing the interest, get reported on the Form 1041 for the trust that year. They become part of the trust income and its creditor claim. Let's use that conceptual example again. Say a $100,000 deposit leads to claiming $1 million in leveraged value, FMV, and $80,000 in interest.
Okay, how does that look on the 1041 itself?
All right, on page 1 of the 1041, in the income section, line 1, interest income, you'd report the $80,000 from the 1099 OID. Then, maybe on line 5, other income, you report the big number, the $1,000 from the 1099-A claim. But here's the really crucial step. That $1 million is immediately adjusted out. It's treated as a non-taxable return of capital.
Or non-taxable. How?
The argument relies on existing Internal Revenue Code sections like 1001 and 1016, which deal with basis and adjustments for property. Basically, you're saying this is the return of the principal value that was leveraged, not new income. So you show an adjustment. Less return of capital, $1 million. Net other income becomes 0. So the total income reported, line 9, is just the $80,000 interest.
Okay. So you've reported the million but made it non-taxable. What about the $80,000 interest?
Now you go to the deductions section on the 1041. That $80,000 can potentially be fully offset using fiduciary fees. These are legitimate expenses for managing the trust. So you report an $80,000 fiduciary fee, line 12. Total deductions match the income. The result, net income, line 17, is 0. Taxable income is 0. Tax due is 0.
Wow.
So according to this strategy, the trust legally receives both the leveraged principal value and the interest completely tax-free. And yes, you'd attach the 1099s and statements explaining the return of capital and the fees.
So, okay, let me see if I've got this. Your simple deposit creates value for the bank.
Huh?
A trust using 1041 and these specific 1099s can claim that value back and then use legitimate deductions and adjustments within the tax code to receive it tax-free. It sounds incredibly powerful, almost like a hidden layer in the financial system. Are there common pitfalls or misunderstandings about this? It seems complex.
That's a really good point. The source material definitely flags some critical things to keep in mind. It's not just about filling out forms. Rick the Wealth Coach stresses other advantages like privacy. A trust's activities are considered a private contract, not public record like individual filings often are. There's also control. The idea is the trust controls the assets, not the IRS, not the bank. And it all ties back to legacy planning, building wealth that lasts for kids' grandkids. And it constantly reinforces that debtor versus creditor idea. 1040 potentially locks you in as a debtor. 1041, structured correctly, makes the trust a creditor with actual claim rights.
Right, that creditor status seems central to the whole thing.
Absolutely. But it also points to why this isn't common knowledge. There's a huge education gap mentioned. Your typical CPA, accountants, even public schools. They're often just not trained in these kinds of 1041 strategies. The system, as it's usually taught, doesn't focus on creditor tactics. And importantly, just having any old trust isn't enough. A standard revocable trust, that might still end up in probate court. Think about Michael Jackson's estate, for example. That was reportedly a revocable trust, still caused issues.
So it needs to be a specific type of trust and strategy.
That's the implication. The IRS isn't going to teach you how to be a creditor. The message from the source is clear. You need to actively seek out this knowledge, maybe through specialized programs or deep self-education.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It suggests there are layers to finance, layers of strategy that go way beyond the mainstream advice, especially about how wealth is handled and how you interact with banks. It really does make you rethink things, doesn't it? From the very basics.
And maybe this raises a final question to chew on. If our financial system, the one described by modern money mechanics, actually allows for this kind of leveraging of deposits, well, what other assumptions about money, things we take for granted, might we need to look at more critically, to really understand and manage our own financial future effectively?
That is a powerful thought. A real challenge to how we usually see things. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it's given you a fresh, maybe even provocative look at how wealth can be managed. Definitely keep exploring these complex but potentially really insightful topics.